In a small, peaceful town in Georgia, where life seems to revolve around the main church, a dark story gradually emerges, shaking the entire community. Reverend Jonathan Carter, the most revered man in town, known for his inspirational sermons and compassion, has kept a terrible secret to himself for years. Behind his stern exterior, he hid another life, one filled with lust, adultery, and betrayal. Jonathan Carter, a middle-aged man with a charming and charismatic appearance, is a symbol of kindness and morality in this peaceful small town. With his deep green eyes and warm smile, he easily won everyone's trust and admiration from the first day he came here more than 15 years ago. With his beautiful wife, Lydia, and 2 young children, Jonathan seemed to bring a new vitality to the town, making the church where he preached the center of the community. Every Sunday, the church is filled with people, not only because of their reverence for God, but also because of the attraction of Pastor Jonathan's inspirational sermons. He is not only a pastor, but also a spiritual guide and support for those who are looking for comfort amid life's difficulties. Under his leadership, the church is not only a place of prayer, but also a center of solidarity and love in the community. Lydia, Jonathan's gentle wife, is a model of virtue and devotion. She is a woman that everyone in town respects, not only because she is the pastor's wife, but also because of her kindness and compassion. However, behind her gentle appearance and ever-present smile, Lydia carries a deep sadness in her heart that she cannot confide to anyone. Jonathan's devotion to church work causes him to gradually distance himself from her, and Lydia begins to feel lonely in her own marriage. However, Lydia never dared to doubt her husband. To her, Jonathan is not only a husband but also a man respected by the whole town. She told herself that their separation was only temporary, that Jonathan's love and loyalty to his family remained intact. But deep down, the insecurity still smolders like a small fire, but enough to gradually burn away the peace she once believed in. Those around him saw only the perfect man in Jonathan, an exemplary husband, a loving father, and a compassionate pastor. But few people know that behind the saint's cloak he wears, Jonathan is hiding a dark side, a life full of secrets that, if exposed, will shake this small community. It all started when Sarah moved to the small town where Jonathan was a pastor. Sarah is a young woman with deep brown eyes and long black hair like a soft flowing stream, creating a mysterious and irresistible beauty. No one in town knows much about her past, only that Sarah came from far away, carrying with her a story she never wanted to tell. This town, with its peace and slow life, seems to be the place she chose to forget the traumatic events she went through. Sarah hopes to find the peace and stability she lost long ago. As soon as Sarah stepped into the church, she attracted all eyes, but it was Pastor Jonathan who most clearly felt her difference. He saw in Sarah's eyes a deep pain, an emptiness that he couldn't help but notice. As a pastor, he felt responsible for helping her and helping her overcome the difficulties in life. At first, it was just simple conversations after the service, words of comfort, and a listening ear from a compassionate pastor. But Sarah is not a weak woman, easily manipulated as Jonathan thought. She has a strong attraction, not only because of her seductive appearance, but also because of the mystery and pain hidden in her eyes. Jonathan is attracted to Sarah in a way he has never experienced before. He couldn't stop thinking about her, even when he returned home to Lydia and the children. From their meetings after the ceremony, they began to have more private conversations in Jonathan's office. Sarah, initially only looking for comfort, quickly feels the special care that Jonathan has for her. His care, warm advice, and unconditional listening made her feel protected and loved in a way she had never felt before. But it was during those conversations that a relationship that crossed moral boundaries began to form. Sarah felt a strong attraction to Jonathan, a connection she had never felt before, and it both scared and excited her. One rainy evening, when the church was empty and everyone had gone home, Jonathan and Sarah met in his office. The atmosphere in the room was quiet, with only gentle light from the flickering candles on the desk. The Bibles lie side by side as silent, yet powerful, witnesses to what is about to happen. Sarah sat across from Jonathan, her brown eyes looking straight at him, containing both fragility and irresistible temptation. Jonathan, feeling his heart beating loudly in his chest, could no longer restrain himself. He walked up to her, and in that emotional atmosphere, they shared their first kiss, a kiss full of taboo, passion, and torment. They both knew they were entering a dangerous path, one with no easy way out. But instead of stopping, they get caught up in the vortex of passion. Their meetings became more frequent and more discreet. Jonathan began to make excuses for staying late at church to pray or prepare a sermon, but in reality it was to spend time with Sarah. They met after the late ceremonies when darkness had fallen on the town and no one was around. During those evenings, Jonathan's small room became their sanctuary, where they could express the dreams, fears, and desires that neither of them dared to share with anyone else. Every time they met, Jonathan felt like he was running away from reality, from the responsibilities and constraints of life. He was drawn to Sarah like an irresistible storm, forgetting every moral boundary, every rule he once believed in. To Sarah, Jonathan is no longer a pastor, but the only man who understands and can make her feel safe and loved. Sarah knew she was playing with fire, but the passion and feeling of power that came with capturing the heart of a man like Jonathan made her unable to stop. The encounters became sweet but sinful escapes. Jonathan and Sarah both knew that their relationship couldn't last forever, but neither of them wanted it to end. They were caught up in each other, forgetting everything else around them, forgetting the possible consequences if this relationship was exposed. And it was in those moments of passion that Jonathan began to realize that he had lost control, that Sarah was not simply a weak woman in need of help, but a strong and full woman. Power, someone who can control even him. The relationship between Jonathan and Sarah becomes deeper and deeper, but that is not the end of Jonathan. Caught in a whirlwind of lust and power, Jonathan begins to realize the attraction he has to other women in the church, those who turn to him in times of trouble, looking for comfort and spiritual guidance. Jonathan gradually turns into a two-faced man on the one hand, a disciplined, merciful pastor, and on the other hand, a man tempted by dangerous, passionate, and sinful love affairs. One of the women caught up in this vortex is Rachel, a charming single mother with blue eyes and a captivating smile. Rachel went through a broken marriage and went to church in the hope of regaining faith and stability in life. In her eyes, Jonathan was not only a pastor, but also the only person who could understand and share her pain. Jonathan, with his empathic instincts, quickly became Rachel's emotional support. Initially, their relationship only stopped at confidant conversations after the ceremony, times when Jonathan listened and comforted her about the difficulties she was facing. However, just like with Sarah, Jonathan and Rachel's closeness gradually turns into a relationship filled with passion and temptation. Rachel, with her experienced charm and desire to be loved, captured Jonathan's heart in a completely different way than Sarah. In Rachel's eyes, Jonathan is not only an exemplary pastor, but also a man she can trust and rely on in her weakest moments. She not only sought comfort from him, but also breathed new life into their relationship, full of challenges and adventures. The encounters became sweet but sinful escapes. Jonathan and Sarah both knew that their relationship couldn't last forever, but neither of them wanted it to end. They were caught up in each other, forgetting everything else around them, forgetting the possible consequences if this relationship was exposed. And it was in those moments of passion that Jonathan began to realize that he had lost control, that Sarah was not simply a weak woman in need of help, but a strong and full woman. Power, someone who can control even him. Meetings with Rachel give Jonathan a feeling of suspense, as if he is participating in a risky game where he always has to be careful not to be discovered. But at the same time, those meetings also made him sink deeper into sin. Jonathan begins to feel like he's walking on a thin wire, where one small mistake can cause everything to fall apart. Both Sarah and Rachel were unaware of each other's existence, and Jonathan believed he could maintain both relationships without being discovered. However, things start to get complicated when Sarah, who is very sensitive and suspicious, begins to notice changes in Jonathan's behavior. Sarah, already deeply traumatized by what she had experienced in the past, felt insecure when she saw that Jonathan no longer paid her the same attention as before. One day, when Jonathan accidentally left his phone in the bathroom after a late ceremony, Sarah accidentally saw a message on his phone with emotional content but not sent to her. Her heart stopped when she realized that Jonathan was in a relationship with another woman. The feeling of betrayal stunned Sarah. She poured all her love and faith into Jonathan, hoping that he would be the one to save her life. But now, he cruelly betrayed her, stabbing a knife into the heart she had dedicated to him. Unable to bear the pain, Sarah began to investigate and discovered the relationship between Jonathan and Rachel. She found out the name of the hotel where Jonathan often visited and spied on them during a secret date, witnessing them entering the room together. That was the moment Sarah felt she was pushed into a corner, unable to escape. In anger and grief, Sarah confronts Jonathan at church after a service. She rushed into his office, slammed the door, her eyes bloodshot from tears and pent-up pain. Jonathan, surprised and frightened, struggled to keep calm as Sarah faced him, words of venom and rage pouring from her mouth like sharp blades. Jonathan knows that Sarah has found out everything, and it could destroy everything he has built. Fearing that Sarah will expose everything, Jonathan tries to appease her with empty promises, trying to control the situation. He swore to her that Rachel meant nothing, that she was still the only one in his heart. Sarah, although deeply hurt, still loves Jonathan and does not want to lose him. She decided to keep quiet, hoping that her love would be enough to keep him. But in Sarah's heart, the pain and insecurity never subsided. From then on, their relationship became tense and full of hidden quarrels. Sarah not only has to deal with the pain of betrayal, but also with the fear that everything will be revealed. She begins to lose faith in Jonathan, and their love, instead of becoming a place of safety, turns into a battle of chaotic emotions and never-ending suspicion. As for Jonathan, with each passing day he felt himself sinking deeper and deeper into the spiral of lies and guilt. He knew that he was gambling with his life, and that one day everything would explode, destroying everything. But Jonathan couldn't stop, couldn't escape the addiction of passion and power he held, and that led them to an unpredictable outcome. After discovering the relationship between Jonathan and Rachel, Sarah was engulfed in rage and extreme pain. She couldn't believe that the man to whom she had devoted her heart and soul could betray her so cruelly. The dreams and hopes for a future with Jonathan were now shattered in an instant, like a sand castle swept away by ocean waves. Sarah's resentment is directed not only at Jonathan but also at Rachel, who has usurped his attention and affection, turning her from a lover into a sworn enemy. Sarah's rage grew more and more, but instead of exploding immediately, she decided to plan her revenge meticulously and discreetly. Sarah understood that, to make Jonathan truly feel the pain she had gone through, she needed to take his life, put an end to all the lies and betrayals once and for all. But Sarah also knows that, if she doesn't act carefully, she could be discovered and unable to complete her goal. In the following days, Sarah silently prepared everything necessary for her plan. She gathered information about Jonathan's schedule, knowing full well that he often stayed behind at church after late services to pray, a perfect excuse to cover up his secret meetings with Rachel. Sarah knew that, if she wanted to succeed, she had to choose the perfect time and place to act without leaving a trace. Every night she lay awake thinking, imagining Jonathan falling under her knife, blood flowing on the floor, and she would feel an immense release. One night of heavy rain, when the whole town fell asleep, Sarah decided to take action. That night the sky was pitch black. Lightning flashed in the rainy night, as if foretelling something terrible was about to happen. Sarah walked out of the house, wearing a dark raincoat to hide her identity, then silently went to church. On the way, heavy raindrops fell to the ground, as if washing away the traces of the sin she was about to commit. Sarah felt no cold or fear, only iron determination remained in her heart. When she arrived at the church, Sarah gently opened the door and walked in, careful not to make any noise. In the dim light of the candles, she approached Jonathan's office, where he was sitting in a chair, completely unaware that the woman he had betrayed was the one who would end his life. The scene in the small room with only two people, in the weak light from the candles, was like a scene from a horror movie. The Bibles lay on the table, like silent witnesses to the crime Sarah was about to commit. Sarah stood before Jonathan, looking straight into his eyes, her brown eyes burning with the rage she had pent up for days. Jonathan, noticing the change in her gaze, began to feel worried. Before he could understand what was happening, Sarah pulled out a sharp knife that she had hidden in her shirt. With all her hatred and pain, she stabbed him straight in the chest. The sound of metal touching skin, Jonathan's gasp echoed in the small space, all blended together to create a haunting piece of music. Jonathan had no chance to resist. His body collapsed to the floor, blood spilled everywhere, splattered on the floor. In that moment, time seemed to stop. All surrounding sounds died out, leaving only suffocating silence. Sarah looked down at Jonathan, her eyes lifeless, as if she were looking at a stranger and not the man she once loved. An emptiness begins to fill her heart, and Sarah realizes that her actions have brought them to an irreversible end. With nothing left to say, nothing left to do, Sarah turned and left the church, leaving behind a bloody scene in the torrential rain. Meanwhile, Lydia, Jonathan's loyal wife, was completely unaware of her husband's affair. She still believes that Jonathan is busy with church work, an important and indispensable part of their lives. But when a week passed without Jonathan returning home, Lydia began to worry. In the early days, she tried to reassure herself that perhaps Jonathan just needed time to think, to escape the pressure of work. But when no one in town saw him and his phone was no longer reachable, Lydia felt a deep unease growing inside her. The feeling of insecurity grew. Lydia began to fear that something bad had happened. She tried to contact church members, friends, and people who knew Jonathan, but no one had any information about him. Lydia felt like she was standing on the edge of a dark abyss, without knowing what to do to save the situation. Every night she lay in bed, unable to sleep, eyes wide open, looking at the ceiling, filled with dark thoughts about her husband's fate. Finally, unable to bear the worry any longer, Lydia decided to report her husband's disappearance to the police. She described Jonathan as an honorable man who always put responsibility first, and that it was completely unusual for him to disappear without a trace like this. Lydia hopes that, with the help of the police, she can find her husband safely and return to a normal life. The police began an investigation, tracing Jonathan's whereabouts from relatives, friends, and church members. They searched everywhere, from home to places Jonathan often visited, but didn't have any clear clues. Lydia followed the investigation with a heavy heart, hoping every day that there would be some news about her husband. But when all search efforts came to a dead end, the police decided to check the church, where Jonathan often spent a lot of time. When the police entered Jonathan's office at the church, they were shocked by the horrifying scene before them. Jonathan's body lay motionless on the floor, blood drying around the fatal wound on his chest. The weak light from the candle in the room only added to the gloom and horror of the scene. This was no ordinary disappearance, this was a brutal murder. Police quickly sealed off the scene, began collecting evidence, and finding out the cause of Jonathan's death. Lydia, upon receiving the news of her husband's death, felt as if the whole world had collapsed beneath her feet. She couldn't believe that the man she had loved and lived with for so many years had been murdered so cruelly. Terrible pain struck. Lydia did not know what to do or think. She could only collapse in deep despair. Lydia's desperate search ended in a tragedy she could never have expected. From a woman who always believed in her husband, Lydia now has to face the fact that not only has her husband been murdered, but her life has also been ruined forever. The police continue to investigate, and gradually the terrible truth about Jonathan's secret relationship with Sarah and Rachel begins to be revealed, bringing with it unimaginable consequences. Immediately, the police changed the investigation from searching for missing people to investigating murder. They began looking into Jonathan's relationships, scrutinizing every contact, text message, and encounter he had in the weeks before he was killed. Through interrogations, they discovered the secret relationship between Jonathan and Sarah, as well as his other relationship with Rachel. Evidence was gradually revealed, and Sarah quickly became the main suspect in the case. The police searched for Sarah, and when they caught her, she did not deny her crime. During a tense interrogation session, Sarah admitted to killing Jonathan, not only because of his betrayal but also because the pain and feeling of being deceived caused her to lose all reason. She believes that killing Jonathan is the only way to end the pain she has endured. Sarah's confession shocks the town, especially Lydia. When she learned the truth about her husband's extramarital affairs, Lydia felt defeated by an overwhelming truth. Not only did she lose her husband, she also had to face the fact that the man she once trusted and loved had betrayed her all this time. Lydia's pain is not only loss but also the complete collapse of trust in the husband she once considered everything. Sarah was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She is locked in a prison haunted by her actions and their consequences. And Lydia, after burying Jonathan, decides to leave town with her children, carrying pain and guilt, trying to start a new life. She knows that she will never forget what happened, and her life will never be the same again. Rachel, Jonathan's second lover, was deeply shaken by this incident. She felt lucky to not be Sarah's target, but at the same time was weighed down by the guilt of participating in that sinful relationship. Rachel decides to leave town, hoping to find peace after all that has happened.